In the vast expanse of the Andromeda Coalition, where 57 species have gathered under one banner, there exists a universal truth: no sentient being fights without weapons. It is the first law of survival, encoded into the DNA of every civilized race across the galaxy. The Zephyrians with their plasma claws, the Thornbacks with their biomechanical armor, the ethereal Whisperlings with their psychic shields all understand that to face combat without protection is to invite certain death. Yet on Station Omega-7, in the neutral zone where diplomats gather and warriors rest their weapons, senior observer Lyralii of the Whisperling Collective witnessed something that would shatter everything she believed about the universe. She watched a single human, a species barely known to the greater galaxy, face down 6 armed Chronath raiders with nothing but his bare hands and an expression of calm determination. What she discovered in the aftermath of that impossible battle would not only change her understanding of humanity but ignite a whisper campaign that would spread across star systems, challenging the very foundations of galactic civilization. For in that moment, Lyralii realized that perhaps the most dangerous species in the universe was not the one with the sharpest claws or the most advanced technology, but the one that had learned to be dangerous without either. This is the story of how one human's impossible victory became the spark that would reshape the balance of power across the stars, and how a single whispered truth can topple empires. The crystalline corridors of Station Omega-7 hummed with the familiar energy of 1,000 different life forms, each carrying their own electromagnetic signature. Senior observer Lyralii moved through the crowds like a ghost, her translucent form barely registering to most species. The Whisperlings had evolved this way on their gas giant homeworld, becoming beings of pure thought and minimal matter, perfect for observation and intelligence gathering. She paused at the intersection leading to the diplomatic quarters, her consciousness automatically cataloging the various species present. 3 Thornback traders argued over shipping manifests near the central hub, their chitinous armor gleaming under the station's artificial sunlight. A group of Zephyrian diplomats glided past, their feathered crests vibrating with suppressed emotion as they discussed the latest territorial disputes. Everything was normal, predictable, following the patterns she had observed for the past 15 cycles. That was when she saw him. The human sat alone at a corner table in the observation deck's cafe, staring out at the swirling nebula beyond the massive viewport. He was unremarkable by most galactic standards: no natural armor, no visible weapons, no biomechanical enhancements. His skin was a pale pink color that seemed almost fragile, and his body structure appeared inefficient for combat. Yet something about his posture, the way he held himself with quiet confidence, made Lyralii pause. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community. Their homeworld, Earth, had only been contacted 12 cycles ago when they achieved faster-than-light travel through some crude but effective technology. Most species regarded them as harmless curiosities, a young race that would either adapt to galactic civilization or fade into obscurity like so many others. The human's name, according to her neural interface, was Marcus Chen, listed as a cultural liaison from the Terran Federation. No military rank, no combat specializations, no enhancement records. Just another diplomat in a station full of them. Lyralii was about to continue her patrol when the station's emergency lights began flashing amber. A priority alert echoed through the corridors in multiple languages, the universal translator struggling to keep pace with the rapid announcements. Security breach in Section 7 Delta. All civilians evacuate immediately. Security forces respond. The cafe erupted into controlled chaos as different species began their evacuation procedures. The Thornbacks immediately formed defensive clusters, their armor plates extending and interlocking. The Zephyrians took to the air, their wings creating downdrafts that helped clear ground space. Most other species either headed for emergency shelters or the nearest transport bays. Marcus Chan remained seated. Lyralii watched with growing fascination as the human calmly finished his beverage, a steaming brown liquid that her database identified as coffee. He showed no signs of panic, no indication that he had even heard the alarm. When the last of the other patrons had fled, he finally stood and walked toward Section 7 Delta. Toward the danger. Lyralii's curiosity overrode her training protocols. Instead of following evacuation procedures, she shadowed the human, her incorporeal form easily keeping pace through the corridors. The station's security forces were moving in the opposite direction, establishing perimeters and safe zones according to standard protocol. None of them seemed to notice one unarmed human walking against the flow. Section 7 Delta housed the station's auxiliary power systems and maintenance bays. It was a maze of pipes, conduits, and service corridors that most species avoided unless necessary. The perfect place for someone to hide or stage an attack. As they descended deeper into the section, Lyraliai's sensory organs detected the electromagnetic signatures of multiple life forms ahead, 6 distinct patterns she recognized as Chronath raiders. The Chronath were among the most feared pirates in this sector of space. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, with thick hide that could deflect most energy weapons and claws capable of rending whole metal, they were apex predators from a death world that produced nothing but killers. Each of the 6 ahead was armed with plasma rifles and vibroblades, weapons that could cut through reinforced armor like paper. Marcus Chan walked directly toward them. Lyraliai found herself frozen with disbelief as the human rounded the final corner and entered the main power junction chamber. The Chronath were there, just as her sensors had indicated, attempting to sabotage the station's primary energy relay. They turned at his approach, their predatory instincts immediately identifying him as prey. The largest of the raiders, a scarred veteran with acid-etched patterns on his hide, laughed, a sound like grinding metal that echoed through the chamber. "Look what wanders into our web," the Chronath growled in galactic standard. "A soft skin, walking alone into the dark. Are you lost, little meat?" Marcus said nothing. He simply stood at the chamber's entrance, his hands at his sides, his expression calm. Lyraliai could detect no weapons on his person, no hidden armor, no emergency beacon. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a single, unarmed human facing 6 armed killers. "I think it's broken," another raider chuckled, raising his plasma rifle. "Softskins break easy when they're scared." "I'm not broken," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite its soft tone. "I'm giving you one chance to surrender." The Chronath erupted in laughter. Lyraliai felt her consciousness recoil at the absurdity of it. One human, offering 6 Chronath raiders the chance to surrender. It was like watching a small insect challenge a pack of apex predators. The outcome was inevitable and tragic. Surrender? The lead raider's amusement turned to anger. "You dare mock the Chronath? We'll make your death slow for that insult." 3 of the raiders raised their weapons simultaneously, plasma charges building with high-pitched whines that indicated lethal force. Marcus Chen moved. Lyraliai's advanced perception allowed her to process events that would appear as blurs to most species, but even she struggled to follow what happened next. The human didn't run, didn't dodge in any conventional sense. Instead, he flowed forward like liquid mercury, his body moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. The first plasma blast passed through empty air where he had been standing a microsecond before. The second and third shots met the same fate as Marcus somehow anticipated their firing patterns and moved accordingly. But he wasn't just avoiding the attacks, he was closing distance. The nearest Chronath swung his vibroblade in a wide arc that should have bisected the human at the waist. Marcus ducked under the swing and drove his fist into the raider's solar plexus. The impact produced a sound like a thunderclap, and the 3-meter-tall predator folded in half before collapsing. Lyraliai's analytical mind tried to process what she had witnessed. The force required to incapacitate a Chronath through their natural armor should have shattered every bone in a human's hand. Marcus Chen's fist appeared undamaged. The second raider attempted to grab the human with claws that could rend steel. Marcus caught the creature's wrist, twisted, and somehow used the Chronath's own momentum to send the massive alien crashing into the power relay console. Sparks erupted as the raider's body weight destroyed thousands of credits worth of equipment. "Impossible," one of the remaining raiders whispered, backing toward the chamber's secondary exit. The lead Chronath roared and charged, his plasma rifle forgotten in favor of his natural weapons. Marcus sidestepped the charge and struck the creature's knee with surgical precision. The joint collapsed with a wet crack, and the raider went down hard, his roar changing to a whimper of pain. 2 raiders fled. The smart ones. The last remaining Chronath, younger and less experienced than his companions, made a final desperate attempt. He grabbed a thermal detonator from his belt, a weapon capable of vaporizing everything within a 50-meter radius. His thumb moved toward the activation switch. Marcus was there before the thumb could complete its motion. He grabbed the raider's wrist, applied some subtle pressure, and the Chronath's fingers opened involuntarily. The detonator clattered harmlessly to the floor. A gentle push sent the young raider stumbling backward into unconsciousness as he struck the bulkhead. The entire engagement had lasted less than 30 seconds. Marcus stood among the defeated Chronath, breathing normally, showing no signs of exertion or injury. He looked down at the unconscious raiders with what Lyralii interpreted as disappointment rather than satisfaction. "I offered you the chance to surrender," he said to the unconscious forms. Then, he activated his communication device and called for station security. Lyralii remained hidden, her consciousness reeling as she tried to process what she had witnessed. Everything she knew about combat, about physics, about the natural order of the galaxy had just been challenged by one human and his bare hands. As station security arrived and began securing the raiders, Marcus Chen walked past Lyralii's hiding spot. For a moment, she thought he might have detected her presence, but he showed no sign of awareness. He simply walked back toward the cafe as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Senior observer Lyralii faced a decision that would change her life. She could file a standard incident report, marking this as an unusual but routine security matter. Or she could investigate further, dig deeper into this impossible human and try to understand what she had really witnessed. Her analytical mind, trained by decades of intelligence work, recognized that she had stumbled onto something significant. Humans were not what the galaxy believed them to be. If one unarmed human could defeat 6 armed Chronath raiders without breaking a sweat, what did that say about their species as a whole? As she followed Marcus back through the station corridors, Lyralii began formulating questions that would drive her investigation for cycles to come. How had he moved that way? Where had that strength come from? Most importantly, what else were the humans hiding from the galactic community? She activated her long-range communication array and sent a priority message back to the Whisperling Collective's intelligence division. The message was simple but urgent: request immediate deep background investigation on Terran Federation and human military capabilities. Something is not as it appears. The response came back within an hour: approved. Investigate and report. Use all necessary resources. Lyralii settled into her quarters aboard the station and began her research. What she would discover over the coming days would shake her understanding of the universe to its very core. The humans, it seemed, had been very careful about what information they shared when they joined the galactic community. They had told everyone about their art, their culture, their desire for peaceful coexistence. They had shared their technology, their trade routes, their scientific discoveries. But they had never mentioned their military history. They had never explained how a species evolved on a death world learned to survive without natural weapons or armor. They had never told anyone about something called martial arts. 3 days of intensive research had left Lyralii's consciousness stretched thin, but the information she had uncovered was worth the fatigue. Using her clearance as a senior observer, she had accessed databases across 17 different species intelligence networks, searching for any mention of human military capabilities or combat history. What she found was a carefully constructed illusion. The official Terran Federation records spoke of a peaceful species that had unified their homeworld through diplomacy and cooperation. Their military was described as a small defensive force, equipped with basic projectile weapons and simple spacecraft designed for system patrol. According to these files, humans had never engaged in large-scale warfare, had no combat traditions, and had developed their technology primarily for exploration and scientific research. It was all lies. The truth lay buried in ancient data fragments, archaeological reports, and cultural documents that the humans had carefully excluded from their official diplomatic packages. Lyralii pieced together a picture that chilled her to her ethereal core. Earth was not just a death world, it was a death world that had produced apex predators who then spent thousands of years fighting each other. The surface records spoke of countless conflicts, weapons that could level entire cities, and combat disciplines refined over millennia. The humans had not evolved claws or natural armor because they had created something far more dangerous: the ability to turn their own bodies into weapons. Martial arts. The term appeared in thousands of contexts across human culture, always with reverent tones that spoke of deep tradition and deadly efficiency. boxing, wrestling, karate, kung fu, muay thai, jiu-jitsu, krav maga, the list went on and on. Each represented a different approach to unarmed combat, developed by different human cultures, refined through generations of conflict. But these were not just fighting techniques. They were philosophies, ways of life that integrated physical conditioning, mental discipline, and strategic thinking into comprehensive systems of personal warfare. The humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to kill without weapons, and they had become very, very good at it. Lyralii discovered records of human competitions where practitioners would break solid stone with their bare hands, where fighters could disable opponents 3 times their size, where masters could move faster than most species' visual tracking could follow. What she had witnessed Marcus Chen do to the Cronath raiders was not impossible, it was simply what happened when a trained human applied techniques developed over thousands of years of constant warfare. The more she researched, the more terrifying the picture became. Every human culture had developed some form of unarmed combat. Every human society had produced warriors who could fight without weapons. Even their children learned simplified versions of these techniques as part of their basic education. The galaxy was sharing space with a species of natural-born killers who had been hiding their true nature behind carefully crafted diplomatic smiles. Lyralii was compiling her preliminary report when her communication array chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender's identification made her consciousness flicker with surprise: Marcus Chen, requesting a private meeting. The human had somehow detected her investigation. They met in her quarters, a space designed for incorporeal beings but equipped with holographic interfaces that allowed physical species to interact comfortably. Marcus entered wearing the same casual clothing she had seen him in before, his expression pleasant but serious. "Senior Observer Lyralii," he said, settling into the provided chair with fluid grace. "I believe we need to talk." "I don't know what you mean," she replied, her translated voice maintaining neutral tones despite her internal turmoil. Marcus smiled, a human expression that many species found disturbing but which Lyralii was beginning to recognize as genuine rather than threatening. "3 days ago, you witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible according to your understanding of human capabilities. Since then, you've accessed 17 different intelligence databases, submitted 43 information requests, and downloaded approximately 8 terabytes of data related to human culture and history." Lyralii's consciousness recoiled. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because we've been monitoring all intelligence-gathering activities related to our species since we joined the galactic community," Marcus replied calmly. "We knew this day would come eventually. Someone was bound to witness something they couldn't explain and start digging deeper." The casual admission of surveillance sent chills through Lyralii's ethereal form. "You've been spying on us." "We've been protecting ourselves," Marcus corrected. "And, by extension, protecting you." "From what?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression becoming serious. "From the truth about what humanity really is." For the next several hours, Marcus Chen told Lyralii things that would give her nightmares for cycles to come. He explained how Earth had produced a species that had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and countless other extinction-level events, not through technology or natural advantages, but through pure, stubborn refusal to die. He described a planet where the environment was so hostile that humans had been forced to develop not just intelligence, but endurance, adaptability, and a capacity for violence that other species couldn't comprehend. Where most species had evolved specialized advantages, claws, armor, venom, psychic abilities, humans had evolved the ability to learn, adapt, and overcome any challenge through sheer determination. "We call it persistence hunting," Marcus explained. "Our ancestors would chase prey animals for days, weeks if necessary. We couldn't outrun them, couldn't overpower them, couldn't kill them quickly. So we followed them until they collapsed from exhaustion, then finished them with simple tools. We are the only species in the galaxy that evolved to win through endurance rather than strength." This explained what Lyralii had witnessed. Marcus hadn't defeated the Cronath raiders through superior firepower or natural advantages. He had used techniques developed over millennia to turn their own aggression against them, to find weaknesses in their seemingly impregnable defenses, to end the fight through efficiency rather than brute force. "But why hide this?" Lyralii asked. "Your capabilities could earn humanity considerable respect in the galactic community." Marcus's expression grew sad.
Because we've seen what happens when species fear us. He told her about the Centauri contact, humanity's first encounter with alien life.
The peaceful meeting had gone well initially, with both species eager to establish diplomatic relations. Then, the Centauri had insisted on a demonstration of human military capabilities as part of standard protocol. The demonstration had been carefully planned to showcase human technology and tactics without revealing their full potential. A single human marine, armed with basic equipment, had been asked to engage in a simulated combat scenario against Centauri forces using non-lethal weapons.
The human had won decisively against 12 Centauri soldiers in full combat gear.
The Centauri delegation departed within hours, Marcus said quietly. They sent word back to their government that humanity was a potential threat that should be contained or eliminated. We spent 3 years convincing them that what they had witnessed was an anomaly, that most humans weren't capable of such performance. This had led to what Marcus called the Great Deception, a coordinated effort by the human government to hide their species' true capabilities from the galactic community. They had carefully crafted an image of humanity as peaceful, weak, and technologically dependent, sharing only their cultural achievements and scientific discoveries while concealing their military history and combat potential.
Every human who leaves Earth for diplomatic or trade missions undergoes extensive training, Marcus explained.
We learn to move differently, to react more slowly, to appear vulnerable and harmless. We suppress our natural reflexes and fighting instincts. We become actors, playing the role of a weak species to avoid terrifying our neighbors. Lyralii felt her worldview crumbling.
But why are you telling me this?
Because you were going to figure it out anyway, Marcus replied. Your research has already uncovered most of the truth. Within a few more days, you would have compiled enough evidence to expose us to the entire galaxy.
And you're asking me not to?
Marcus stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the nebula beyond.
I'm asking you to consider what would happen if you did. The implications hit Lyralii like a plasma burst.
If the galaxy learned that humanity had been deceiving them, that every human was potentially a deadly weapon in disguise, the reaction would be swift and brutal.
The Andromeda Coalition would view it as an infiltration, a preparation for conquest.
They would demand humanity's withdrawal from all galactic institutions, or worse, they might attempt a preemptive strike against Earth itself.
We don't want to conquer anyone, Marcus said softly. We don't want to dominate or destroy.
We just want to be part of something larger than ourselves, to share knowledge and culture with other species, to explore the galaxy together.
But we can't do that if everyone is afraid of us. So you'll continue the deception?
For as long as necessary. Marcus turned back to her, his expression resolute. We've learned to live with being misunderstood.
It's a small price to pay for peaceful coexistence. Lyralii processed this information in silence. The ethical implications were staggering.
The humans were lying to the entire galaxy, but their motivations appeared genuinely peaceful. They were capable of incredible violence, but seemed determined to avoid it. They were perhaps the most dangerous species in known space, yet they had chosen to present themselves as harmless diplomats and traitors.
What about the Cronath raiders? She asked. How do you explain what happened?
Self-defense, Marcus replied simply. A lucky series of events that allowed me to disable several attackers before station security arrived. The raiders were injured in the fighting, but their injuries are consistent with falls and equipment malfunctions. The official report will show that they were caught in the act of sabotage and attempted to resist arrest, resulting in accidents during their capture.
Another cover-up.
Another careful manipulation of the truth to maintain humanity's facade of harmlessness. Lyralii realized that this probably wasn't the first time such an incident had been concealed. How many of you are there? She asked.
How many humans with these capabilities?
Marcus smiled that disturbing human expression again.
All of us. The simple answer sent shockwaves through Lyralii's consciousness. Not just some humans, all humans possessed these capabilities.
Every diplomat, trader, scientist, and cultural liaison she had encountered was potentially capable of what she had witnessed Marcus do to the Cronath raiders. Humanity hadn't just hidden their military history, they had hidden the fact that their entire species was essentially a military force in disguise. The training starts in childhood, Marcus explained, reading her reaction correctly. Every human child learns basic self-defense, physical conditioning, and tactical awareness as part of their standard education. By the time we reach adulthood, these skills are so ingrained that we have to consciously suppress them to appear normal to other species.
And, if you didn't suppress them?
Marcus was quiet for a long moment.
If humanity ever decided to abandon peaceful coexistence, if we ever chose conquest over diplomacy, the galaxy would fall within a single cycle.
Not because of our technology or our weapons, but because we are a species that evolved to never give up, never surrender, never stop fighting until the threat is eliminated. The meeting ended with Marcus making a simple request: give him time to report this conversation to his superiors before Lyralii filed her report. He promised that humanity's leadership would consider revealing more of their truth to the galactic community, but he needed to present the situation carefully to avoid panic. Lyralii agreed to the delay, but she had already made her decision. The galaxy deserved to know what they were sharing space with, regardless of the consequences. The humans' deception, no matter how well-intentioned, was a violation of trust that could not be allowed to continue. As Marcus left her quarters, Lyralii began composing a message that would change everything. A whisper that would spread across star systems, challenging the balance of power that had kept the galaxy stable for centuries. She had no idea that her whisper would soon become a roar. Lyralii's message began as a single encrypted transmission to her handler in the Whisperling Collective's intelligence division. She had crafted it carefully, presenting her findings as a routine intelligence update rather than the galaxy-shattering revelation it truly was. The last thing she wanted was to trigger a panic that could lead to unnecessary bloodshed. The message contained 3 critical pieces of information. Humans possessed advanced unarmed combat capabilities, they had been systematically concealing their true nature from the galactic community, and their entire species appeared to be trained in these deception protocols. She included detailed sensor recordings of the incident with the Cronath raiders, her research findings, and Marcus Chen's own admissions during their private meeting. Within hours, her handler responded with a priority classification upgrade and orders to maintain surveillance on all human activities in her sector. Within days, similar intelligence gathering operations were activated across Whisperling space. Within a week, the information had been quietly shared with their allies in the Andromeda Coalition's intelligence network. The whisper had begun to spread.
Admiral Faxmorin of the Thornback Defense Force was reviewing routine intelligence reports when the Whisperling data crossed his desk.
As a veteran of 17 interstellar conflicts, he had learned to spot potential threats long before they became active problems. The human intelligence packet immediately triggered every instinct he had developed over 3 decades of military service. He read Lyralii's report 3 times before activating his secure communication array.
Intelligence Division, this is Admiral Faxmorin.
I need a complete review of all human military assets in Coalition space.
Priority Alpha classification.
Sir, the humans have minimal military presence outside their home system, his aide responded. Standard database shows approximately 200 personnel across all their diplomatic and trade missions. I don't care what the standard database shows, Faxmorin growled, his armor plates shifting with agitation.
I want real numbers. How many humans are currently in Coalition space, what are their official positions, and where exactly are they located?
The investigation that followed revealed something that chilled the Admiral's chitinous shell. The humans had been steadily increasing their presence throughout Coalition space for the past 5 cycles, but they had done it so gradually and quietly that no one had noticed the pattern. They weren't just sending diplomats and traders, they were conducting what appeared to be a comprehensive intelligence gathering operation across every major star system in the galaxy.
Human cultural liaisons were stationed at key transportation hubs.
Human trade representatives had established offices near critical resource centers. Human scientific observers had somehow gained access to research facilities developing advanced military technologies. If the Whisperling intelligence was correct, every one of these seemingly harmless individuals was actually a highly trained operative capable of extreme violence.
Admiral Faxmorin called an emergency meeting with the Coalition Defense Council.
The meeting took place in the heavily secured conference chamber aboard the Council's flagship, deep in space between the Thornback and Zephyrian home systems.
Representatives from 12 major species attended, either in person or through quantum-encrypted communication links. The discussion that followed would reshape galactic politics for generations to come.
Esteemed colleagues, Admiral Thax Morin began, his translated voice carrying the weight of his concern. We face a potential infiltration scenario unlike anything in our recorded history. He presented Lyraliai's findings, the supplementary intelligence gathered by Thornback forces, and his own analysis of human deployment patterns throughout coalition space. The reaction was immediate and varied, reflecting the different species' approaches to threat assessment. The Zephyrian representative, Ambassador Skyweaver Velthanes, was the first to speak. This is concerning, but we must be careful not to overreact. The humans have shown no hostile intentions in their interactions with our species. No hostile intentions that we've detected, corrected General Krax of the Kronath Republics. His scarred hide showed evidence of countless battles, and his tone carried the authority of someone who had survived by trusting his instincts. According to this intelligence, they've been systematically deceiving us for 12 cycles. If they can hide their combat capabilities so effectively, what else might they be concealing? The debate that followed revealed deep philosophical divisions within the coalition about how to handle potential threats. The diplomatic species favored continued observation and careful confrontation through official channels. The military species pushed for immediate containment and demand for full disclosure of human capabilities. The trade-focused species worried about the economic implications of severing relations with Earth. It was the representative from the ethereal collective who asked the question that silenced the chamber: if this intelligence is accurate, and every human possesses these capabilities, what does that make Earth itself? The implication hung in the recycled air like a toxic cloud. Earth wasn't just a homeworld, it was a training ground that had produced an entire species of natural warriors. If the planet's population was anything like the humans operating in coalition space, then humanity represented the single largest military force in the galaxy, disguised as a peaceful civilization.
We need more information, Admiral Thax Morin concluded. I'm authorizing deep reconnaissance missions to the Sol system.
We need to understand what we're really dealing with before we decide how to respond.
The reconnaissance missions launched within days, utilizing the Coalition's most advanced stealth technology and intelligence-gathering capabilities. 3 separate task forces approached Earth from different vectors, their orders to observe and record without making contact.
What they discovered would validate every fear the Coalition leadership had developed.
Earth's true nature was nothing like what humanity had portrayed to the galaxy.
The planet was not a peaceful world united under harmonious government. It was a military fortress that made the Coalition's most heavily defended systems look like civilian colonies. Every major landmass contained training facilities, weapons research centers, and industrial complexes dedicated to military production. The human population wasn't engaged in the arts, sciences, and trade they had claimed they were preparing for war. The reconnaissance teams observed live-fire exercises involving millions of participants, combat training programs that began in early childhood, and weapons development projects that far exceeded anything in the Coalition's arsenals. Most disturbing of all, they detected massive underground installations that appeared to be designed for rapid military mobilization on a planetary scale. Earth wasn't hiding its military capabilities, it was hiding the fact that it was one giant military base. Commander ZYX-Tal of the Ethereal Collective's Intelligence Division transmitted her findings back to Coalition Command with growing horror in her psychic emanations.
The entire human civilization appears to be organized around military principles, she reported.
Their cultural centers are command and control facilities.
Their educational institutions are training academies. Their research universities are weapons development laboratories. What about their civilian population? Admiral Thax Morin asked during the secure briefing.
Sir, we don't believe they have a civilian population in any sense we would recognize, Commander ZYX-Tal replied. Every human citizen appears to maintain some level of combat training and military readiness.
Their entire society is structured as a reserve military force.
The intelligence painted a picture that terrified Coalition leadership. Humanity hadn't just hidden their individual combat capabilities, they had hidden the fact that their entire species was essentially a military organization masquerading as a peaceful civilization. Earth was a fortress world populated by warriors, and they had spent 12 cycles infiltrating Coalition space while concealing their true nature. The whisper that had started with Rayleigh's observation had become a roar of alarm throughout coalition intelligence networks. Emergency protocols were activated, defensive preparations began, and contingency plans for potential human aggression were developed and distributed. But the humans had been monitoring coalition communications just as carefully as they monitored intelligence gathering activities. Marcus Chen stood in the secure briefing room deep beneath the Terran Federation's diplomatic compound on Station Omega-7, reviewing the latest intelligence reports with growing concern. The coalition's reconnaissance missions had been detected, their emergency meetings had been intercepted, and their defensive preparations had been observed by human intelligence operatives throughout their space. "How bad is it?" asked Director Sarah Martinez, head of the Federation's External Relations Division. "They know," Marcus replied simply. "Not everything, but enough. They've figured out that our civilian identity is largely fabricated, and they're treating us as a potential invasion force." "Are they moving toward hostile action?" Marcus studied the data streams flowing across the holographic displays around the briefing room. Coalition military units were being repositioned throughout their territory, weapons systems were being activated, and emergency defensive protocols were being implemented. It was the classic pattern of preparation for conflict. "Not yet, but they're preparing for the possibility," he said. "We have maybe a few days before someone in their leadership decides that a preemptive strike is preferable to waiting for us to make the first move." Director Martinez activated her communication array and sent a priority alert to Earth. The message was simple but urgent: Operation Masquerade has been compromised. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was humanity's contingency plan for exactly this scenario, the revelation of their true nature to a hostile galactic community. It involved the complete abandonment of their peaceful facade and the preparation for total war against the coalition if necessary. Within hours, every human operative throughout coalition space received coded instructions. Cultural liaisons began downloading critical intelligence and preparing for immediate extraction. Trade representatives activated hidden communication networks and began coordinating with military assets in the Sol system. Scientific observers started sabotaging the research projects they had been monitoring to prevent coalition access to advanced technologies. The masquerade was ending, and both sides were preparing for the conflict they had all hoped to avoid. But neither side realized that the galaxy's newest crisis was about to be overshadowed by something far more dangerous. Deep in the void between star systems, ancient sensors that had been dormant for millennia were beginning to detect signs of renewed activity. The whispers spreading through coalition space had awakened something that both humans and aliens would soon wish had remained sleeping. The real test of humanity's hidden capabilities was about to begin, and this time, they wouldn't be fighting alone. The Devourers had been sleeping for 3,000 years. In the vast emptiness between galactic clusters, their massive hive ships drifted in powered-down stasis, waiting for the conditions that would trigger their return to active hunting status. They were older than any of the current galactic civilizations, a species that had evolved not on a planet but in the vacuum of space itself, feeding on the electromagnetic emissions of living worlds and the panic responses of dying civilizations. The ancient automated monitoring systems that surrounded their slumbering fleet had specific criteria for awakening the hive mind: widespread fear, military mobilization across multiple star systems, and the signature electromagnetic patterns that indicated a galactic civilization preparing for large-scale warfare. The Coalition's response to the human revelation had triggered all three conditions. Deep in the flagship's biomechanical core, the Hive Queen stirred from her millennia-long sleep. Her consciousness expanded outward, touching the minds of millions of her children scattered across hundreds of ships. They awakened in perfect synchronization, their hunger sharp after centuries of dormancy. The galaxy had grown populous in their absence. Where once there had been perhaps a dozen spacefaring species, now there were dozens, all clustered together in convenient groups. The Coalition alone represented more prey than the Devourers had consumed in their last active period. But there was something new, something that the ancient monitoring systems had never detected before. Among the standard electromagnetic signatures of galactic civilization, there was a strange pattern, a species that projected none of the usual fear responses, whose military preparations generated entirely different types of energy emissions. The Queen's consciousness probed deeper, analyzing the data streams flowing from the galaxy's edge. The humans were unlike any prey species the Devourers had encountered in their millions of years of hunting. Where other civilizations broadcast terror and desperation when threatened, the humans projected something the Devourers had no previous experience with: calm anticipation. It was intriguing. It was also irrelevant. Prey was prey, regardless of its emotional state. The awakening began. Admiral Faxmoran was reviewing the latest intelligence on human military capabilities when every sensor array in Coalition space began screaming warnings. The alerts came simultaneously from observation posts scattered across 17 star systems, all reporting the same impossible readings: massive energy signatures emerging from empty space, approaching at speeds that defied conventional physics. "Admiral, we're detecting approximately 300 unknown contacts," his communications officer reported, her voice tight with professional control masking obvious fear. "Estimated mass suggests capital ship classification or larger. They're approaching from multiple vectors, converging on Coalition space." Faxmoran's combat instincts, honed through decades of conflict, immediately recognized the tactical implications. Invasion formation. Someone's been planning this for a long time. The identification took another 6 hours. Deep space reconnaissance drones finally got close enough to the approaching fleet to capture detailed scans, and what they revealed sent shockwaves through Coalition command. The ships were biological in nature, grown rather than built, with energy signatures that matched nothing in any database. More disturbing, they appeared to be actively feeding on the electromagnetic emissions of the drones themselves, growing visibly larger with each passing hour. "They're not just ships," reported Commander ZYXTAL from her analysis station. "They're living creatures. And they're hungry." The first contact came 12 hours later, broadcast simultaneously to every inhabited system in Coalition space. The message was transmitted directly into the minds of every sentient being within range, bypassing communication equipment entirely and speaking in concepts rather than words. "We are the Devourers. You have grown numerous in our absence. We return to feed. Resistance will only make the consumption more satisfying." The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Across Coalition space, entire planetary populations descended into panic. Military forces that had been preparing for potential conflict with humanity suddenly found themselves facing an existential threat from a completely unknown enemy. Defensive preparations that had been designed for conventional warfare were utterly inadequate against biological ships that could feed on energy weapons and grow stronger from each attack. Within hours, Coalition leadership realized they faced a choice between extinction and the unthinkable, asking for help from the species they had been preparing to fight. The emergency communication came directly to Marcus Chen as he supervised the evacuation of human personnel from Station Omega-7. Admiral Faxmoran's image appeared on his personal communicator, the Thornback's usually composed demeanor showing cracks of desperation. "Human representative, we require immediate conference regarding mutual defense against unknown hostiles." Marcus felt a grim satisfaction at the Admiral's carefully neutral tone. 12 hours ago, the Coalition had been treating humanity as a potential invasion force. Now they needed allies against a real invasion. "I'll need to consult with my superiors," Marcus replied diplomatically. "The current situation is complicated. The current situation is that we're all going to die unless we cooperate," Faxmoran said bluntly, abandoning diplomatic protocol. "These creatures are unlike anything we've encountered. Our conventional weapons are ineffective. Our defensive strategies are useless. We need every advantage we can get, including whatever capabilities your species has been hiding." Within an hour, Marcus found himself in a secured conference chamber alongside representatives from every major Coalition species. The atmosphere was tense, with centuries of diplomatic protocol struggling against the reality of immediate threat. The humans were no longer being treated as potential enemies, but they weren't exactly trusted allies either. Director Martinez joined the conference via quantum encrypted link from Earth, her image appearing alongside the assembled alien leadership with calm professionalism that contrasted sharply with the barely controlled panic radiating from most other participants. "Honored representatives," she began, "humanity is prepared to assist in the defense against these Devourers, but we'll need full disclosure of Coalition military capabilities and complete tactical coordination." "In exchange for what?" asked Ambassador Valfanis, her feathered crest trembling with stress. In exchange for honest cooperation moving forward, Martinez replied.
No more deception on either side.
We share our true capabilities, you share yours, and we face this threat as genuine allies.
The negotiations that followed were unlike any in galactic history.
With extinction looming, both sides abandoned the careful diplomatic dance they had been performing for cycles and began discussing the reality of their respective military strengths. The coalition revealed defensive capabilities that humanity had never suspected: reality warping technologies, weaponized psychic abilities, and industrial capacities that could produce fleets of warships within days. They had been hiding their own capabilities almost as effectively as the humans had hidden theirs.
Humanity's revelations were equally shocking to the coalition representatives.
Earth's population wasn't just militarily trained, they were the descendants of a species that had survived multiple near-extinction events by becoming the most adaptable and persistent predators their planet had ever produced. Their peaceful space program was actually a carefully planned expansion strategy designed to ensure species survival through geographic distribution. Their trade networks were intelligence-gathering operations.
Their cultural exchanges were recruitment and evaluation programs.
Most importantly, their entire military doctrine was based on fighting enemies more powerful than themselves and winning through unconventional tactics, superior mobility, and the kind of stubborn refusal to surrender that had carried them through ice ages and asteroid impacts. Your species has been preparing for this kind of conflict for your entire evolutionary history, Admiral Faxmoran observed with something approaching admiration. Fighting superior enemies and surviving impossible odds. It's what we do, Marcus replied simply.
The question is whether we can do it well enough to save everyone.
The tactical planning session that followed revealed the scope of the challenge they faced. The Devourer's biological ships could adapt to most energy-based weapons, growing stronger from electromagnetic attacks and developing immunity to conventional tactics within hours of first exposure. Their feeding process literally consumed the life force of inhabited planets, leaving dead worlds in their wake. But they had weaknesses. Their biological nature made them vulnerable to certain types of physical damage. Their feeding process required specific electromagnetic frequencies that could potentially be disrupted. Most importantly, they had evolved as hunters of civilizations that relied primarily on technology and were unprepared for enemies that could fight effectively without advanced equipment. They expect us to fight like civilized species, Marcus observed as the planning session continued into the night. Energy weapons, shield walls, defensive formations.
They've never encountered prey that could adapt faster than they could evolve.
The strategy that emerged was unlike anything either humans or coalition species had ever attempted. Instead of trying to match the Devourer's technological advantages, they would exploit their biological limitations. Instead of fighting a conventional space battle, they would force the enemy into the kind of asymmetric warfare that had shaped humanity's entire military tradition. It would require both sides to abandon every assumption they had about proper military conduct.
Coalition forces would have to learn to fight like humans, using deception, improvisation, and overwhelming aggression to overcome superior enemies.
Human forces would have to integrate with alien technologies and coordinate with species they had been deceiving for over a decade.
The planning took 18 hours.
The Devourers would arrive in 3 days. As the conference ended and both sides began implementing their desperate strategy, Lyralia found herself alone with Marcus in the station's observation deck. The nebula outside seemed different now, less beautiful and more ominous, as if the approaching threat had changed the very nature of space itself. "Do you think we can actually defeat them?" she asked, her translated voice carrying uncertainty that her species rarely allowed others to detect. Marcus stared out at the stars, his expression thoughtful. The Devourers have been successful for millions of years because they hunt civilizations that fight the way civilizations are supposed to fight. But we're not a civilization in any sense they would understand.
What are you then?
Marcus smiled, and, for the first time, Lyralia found the human expression genuinely comforting rather than disturbing. We're the species that survived everything our planet could throw at us, then looked up at the stars and decided to do it again on a galactic scale. As they spoke, across coalition space, the largest military mobilization in galactic history was beginning. Fleets were being assembled, weapons were being prepared, and millions of beings were steeling themselves for a battle that would determine the fate of their entire civilization. But, deep in the void, the Devourers continued their approach, confident in the hunt that had never failed them before. They had no way of knowing that for the first time in their ancient history, they were about to encounter prey that considered extinction just another challenge to overcome. The Battle of the Void began 67 hours after the first Devourer ships entered Coalition space. Admiral Faxmoran commanded the largest fleet in galactic history from the bridge of the Coalition flagship Unyielding Dawn. Around him, representatives from every major species coordinated the defense of their civilization through quantum-encrypted communication networks that spanned dozens of star systems. It should have been the greatest moment in Coalition military history. Instead, it felt like a desperate last stand against inevitable extinction. The first engagement had gone exactly as poorly as everyone had feared. Coalition forces had attempted a standard defensive formation, positioning their most heavily armed vessels between the Devourers and inhabited systems. The biological ships had simply absorbed the energy from their weapons, growing visibly larger with each attack, then proceeded to tear through the defensive line like it wasn't there. 3 entire fleet formations had been consumed in the first hour of battle. The survivors' reports were terrifying, Coalition ships being literally eaten by biological constructs that treated advanced military vessels like food sources. The Devourers weren't just defeating Coalition forces, they were feeding on them. Status report: Admiral Faxmoran commanded, his armor plates shifting with barely controlled anxiety. Sir, we've lost contact with Task Forces 7, 11, and 14, his communications officer reported. Last transmission indicated their ships were being consumed by the enemy biological matrix. Faxmoran's chitinous shell clicked as he processed the implications. At this rate, they would lose the war within days, not weeks. The conventional military might of the Coalition was worse than useless against an enemy that could feed on their technology and grow stronger from their attacks. That was when the humans arrived. The first sign was a series of massive explosions deep within the Devourer formation. Not energy blasts or missile impacts, but the distinctive signatures of kinetic strikes delivered with surgical precision. Coalition sensors detected dozens of small craft moving through the biological ships at impossible speeds, too fast for targeting systems to track, striking with weapons that appeared to be simple physical projectiles. "What the hell is that?" someone asked over the command frequency. Marcus Chen's voice came through the communication array with calm professionalism that contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding them. Terran Assault Squadron beginning Phase 1 operations. Recommend Coalition forces withdraw to minimum safe distance. Admiral Faxmoran watched his tactical displays with growing amazement as the human attack unfolded. Instead of trying to fight the Devourers with energy weapons that they could absorb, the humans were using kinetic projectiles, chunks of metal fired at enormous velocities that punched through biological armor like it was tissue paper. Instead of attempting to match the Devourers' technological advantages, they were exploiting their biological limitations. But it was more than just tactics. The way the human pilots moved their ships defied every principle of civilized space combat. They flew directly through Devourer formations, using the biological ship's own mass as cover while delivering point-blank attacks. They performed maneuvers that should have killed any organic crew through acceleration stress. They fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. "Coalition Command, this is Captain Sarah Kim aboard the Persistent," came another human voice. "We're beginning infiltration operations. Recommend you prepare for significant tactical changes in the next 30 minutes. Infiltration? Admiral Faxmoran asked. Infiltration of what? His answer came in the form of the most terrifying display of military audacity he had ever witnessed. Human assault teams, equipped with nothing more than basic environmental suits and kinetic weapons, were boarding the Devourer ships. They were literally fighting hand-to-hand with biological constructs the size of buildings, using techniques that turned the alien size and strength against them. The reports that came back defied belief. Human soldiers were moving through the interior of biological ships like antibodies through an infected organism, targeting critical systems with surgical precision. They were using the Devourer's own biological processes against them, introducing toxins and viruses that caused massive internal damage. Most incredibly, they were winning. How is this possible? Ambassador Velfanis demanded over the command frequency. How can organic beings fight successfully inside those things? Director Martinez's voice came through from Earth. carrying the kind of calm authority that only came from absolute confidence in victory.
Because we've been fighting biological threats for our entire evolutionary history.
Bacteria, viruses, parasites, predators, our species survived by learning to turn biology against itself. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was decided in the first 30 minutes when it became clear that the Devourers had never encountered an enemy like humanity. They were used to hunting civilized species that relied on technology and followed predictable tactical doctrines. They had no experience with prey that could adapt faster than they could evolve, that treated impossible odds as routine challenges, that fought with a level of vicious creativity that bordered on insanity. The turning point came when Captain Marcus Chen, leading a boarding party aboard the largest Devourer ship, managed to reach what appeared to be the creature's central nervous system. Instead of attempting to destroy it with conventional weapons, he did something that would be talked about in military academies for centuries. He began teaching it to fear. Using a combination of psychological warfare techniques and carefully administered pain stimuli, Marcus convinced the Devourer's biological intelligence that continuing the attack would result in unacceptable losses. The creature had never experienced fear before. It had always been the apex predator in every encounter. The sensation of being outfought by smaller, weaker prey triggered responses that its ancient biology was not prepared to handle. The Devourer's ship began to retreat. Within hours, the retreat had spread through the entire biological fleet. The Hive Queen's consciousness, connected to every ship in the formation, was experiencing something unprecedented, the knowledge that her species could be defeated. The emotional shock of this realization rippled through the hive mind, causing widespread panic among creatures that had never known doubt. Admiral Thax Morin watched the tactical displays with wonder as the most feared threat in galactic history turned and fled back into the void between star clusters. The Coalition's conventional forces had been helpless against the Devourers, but humanity had driven them off in a single engagement. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying new respect when addressing the human communication frequencies. "Enemy fleet in full retreat," Marcus Chen reported from somewhere inside the biological ship he had just conquered. "Estimate 6 hours until complete withdrawal from Coalition space. Recommend pursuit operations to ensure they don't regroup." "Pursuit operations?" Admiral Thax Morin repeated. "You want to chase them into deep space?" "We want to make sure they understand that this galaxy is under our protection now," came the reply. "The Devourers are hunters, not warriors. They'll avoid prey that can fight back effectively, but only if they're convinced the risk isn't worth the potential reward." The pursuit lasted 3 days and covered distance that took Coalition ships into regions of space they had never explored. The human fleet followed the retreating Devourers relentlessly, striking at stragglers and damaged ships while broadcasting a simple message: this galaxy was no longer available for hunting. When it was over, humanity had accomplished something that no species in galactic history had managed. They had not just survived an encounter with the Devourers, they had driven them away permanently. The aftermath brought changes that reshaped galactic civilization forever. The careful diplomatic balance that had maintained peace between Coalition species was replaced by a new reality. Humanity's position as the galaxy's protector species was no longer a matter of debate. Lyraeli found herself back on Station Omega-7, watching human and Coalition diplomats work together to establish new defensive protocols and mutual aid agreements. The whisper that had started with her observation of one human defeating 6 Cronath raiders had become the foundation for an entirely new galactic order. Marcus Chen approached her table in the observation deck's cafe, carrying the same steaming cup of coffee she had seen him with weeks ago. He looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had completed a difficult but necessary task. "Any regrets?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "About what?" "About starting the chain of events that led to all this." Marcus gestured toward the viewports, where human and Coalition ships could be seen working together in joint patrol formations. "If you hadn't investigated what you saw, if you hadn't filed that report, none of this would have happened." Lyraeli considered the question carefully. Her simple observation had triggered a series of events that had nearly led to war between humanity and the Coalition, had revealed the deceptive nature of both civilizations, and had ultimately resulted in the first successful defense against the galaxy's most ancient threat. "No regrets," she said finally. "The galaxy deserved to know the truth about humanity. And humanity deserved the chance to prove what they really are." Marcus smiled that disturbing human expression that she had finally learned to interpret correctly. It wasn't a threat display or a sign of aggression, it was simple satisfaction at a job well done.
What will you do now? He asked.
Continue observing, Lyralii replied.
That's what my species does. But, I think I'll be observing a very different galaxy from now on. Through the viewport, the stars looked the same as they always had. But, Lyralii knew that appearances could be deceiving.
The whisper she had started about humanity's hidden nature had grown into a roar that had changed the balance of power across the galaxy.
The humans were no longer pretending to be weak, harmless diplomats. The coalition was no longer pretending that technology alone could guarantee their safety.
And, somewhere in the deep void between galactic clusters, the Devourers were learning that the universe contained prey species that could bite back. The galaxy was a more dangerous place now, but it was also safer. The hunters had become the hunted, and the apex predators had discovered that they were no longer at the top of the food chain.
Marcus Chen finished his coffee and stood to leave. Senior Observer Lyralii, he said with formal politeness, thank you for seeing what others missed.
Sometimes the most important discoveries start with someone paying attention to the impossible. As he walked away, Lyralii activated her communication array and began composing her final report on the human investigation. This time, however, she wasn't reporting a potential threat to galactic security. She was documenting the emergence of galactic security itself, in the form of a species that had learned to turn impossible odds into inevitable victory. The whisper had become a roar, and the roar had become a promise. As long as humanity stood guard, the galaxy would never again be defenseless against the darkness between the stars. In the years that followed, other threats would emerge from the void. Ancient machines, energy beings, reality-warping entities that existed outside normal spacetime all would discover that the galaxy had changed since the Devourers' defeat. They would find themselves facing not just one species of persistent, adaptable predators, but an entire galactic community that had learned to fight with human tenacity and alien technology combined. The age of easy prey had ended forever, and it had ended because one whisperling observer had paid attention to the impossible sight of a human fighting unarmed and winning against all odds. Sometimes, Lyralii reflected as she watched the stars, the most important battles are won not with weapons or technology, but with the simple courage to look closely at things that don't make sense and ask the right questions about what you see. The galaxy was safer because someone had been watching when Marcus Chen proved that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't hidden technology or superior numbers, it was the refusal to accept defeat, even when victory seemed impossible.